Good morning, great Americans. It's another great American video. The year is 2025. Happy New Year. That was the other day. So Jimmy Carter, Jumma Carter, has finally passed. And I cannot say that I mourn his passing all that much because he was a horrible, terrible president. He held the mantle of worst president ever until senile Biden came along. And boy, that was a tough. That was tough toppling Carter off of that mantle, but Biden managed to pull it off. But for my adult life, Carter has always been the worst president ever. Look, let's a quick recap. Look, Nixon, Richard Nixon, of course, left office. Boy, in retrospect, compared to the crimes and atrocities of the Democrat Party, Richard Nixon was actually a saint. But back then in the 70s, he told a lie, and that was going to get him impeached. And he left office to avoid impeachment all over a lie involving a cover up, which of a crime which he actually had nothing to do with. He didn't even know about the crime until after the crime had been committed. That would be the break-in of the Watergate break-in. He didn't even know about it until after it was committed. And then the cover-up is always the worst, right? That's what they say. Of course, now with fake news licking the ass of the Democrat Party, they cover up all they want to, and they help them cover up. So those days are over with. But back when Nixon was president, the cover-up became worse than the crime itself, and he covered up for the Watergate, and so he was out. All right, and so then came Gerald Ford, who nobody elected. Nobody really liked. I mean, Gerald Ford was a nice guy. He was sort of an amiable dope, right? But nobody elected him, and therefore Carter was able to win in 76 because Carter went up against Gerald Ford. And then, Gerald Ford had only been in for about a couple of years or whatever. So Carter had an easy track into the White House, but Carter was an idiot, a peanut farmer, a dope, a moron. I mean, well, I got to be fair. He wasn't a moron. I mean, he was intelligent, right? He was in the Navy. But I mean, he was a political moron and he was a policy moron, let's say. So he got in. I mean, he screwed up foreign policy. He screwed up domestic policy. I lived during the time of Carter. In fact, my high school years, 76 through 80, were the exact time of the Carter. So my entire time in high school was the entire time Carter was president. And I remember, man, gas line. I mean, I remember that you had to get gasoline based on your license plate number, only on odd and even days if you had odd or even license plate. And gasoline line went way down the street. I mean, way down the street. It was insane. My dad was building houses and buying houses, and he was blowing his stack at the insane um, interest rates, right? I mean, they were just off the hook, and people were being laid off, and jobs were being lost. The Soviet Union was on the march in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and this idiot Carter. I mean, you think they say, young people who don't know any better, they think that the economy got bad near the end of the Bush presidency. That was peanuts compared to what Carter did to us. Man, he destroyed this nation. And when energy prices rose, this idiot had the balls to get on national TV and sit in front of a fireplace with a sweater, and his answer to Americans was to turn down the thermostat. Not not any sort of actual concrete change to fix the price problem. It was just, well, turn down your thermostat. Oh, and lower the speed limit to 55 miles an hour. This is the stupidity of Jimmy Carter. So he was an idiot. Need I remind you? Now, how about Cuba? So bear in mind now that we're talking the late 70s, not too long removed from Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this idiot, uh, Carter, he actually wanted to lift all the embargoes and sanctions off of Cuba and Castro in the 70s. The 70s, a mere decade later after the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Castro knew that Carter was such a pussy that Castro decided to empty out all of his prisons, put the prisoners on a boat, and send them to Florida. And Carter didn't do a damn thing about it. He let them all come in, and that was the beginning of the American uh, Cuban community being totally loyal to the Republican Party. Man, because Carter was an asshole. He kissed Castro's ass back when during the height of the Cold War, when Castro was still a bad player. Of course, he's still a bad player, but I mean, he was in it deep. So this is how much of an idiot, a total idiot Carter was. And then, of course, he kissed the Ruskies' ass because the Democrats have always kissed the Ruskies' ass. This latest flip flop about Trump and Putin is all just bullshit. Trump didn't collude with Putin. The Democrats were just mad because Hillary lost. But in fact, historically, it is Democrats who have kissed the ass of the Soviets and the communists and the Russians, and Carter was one of them. Oh, I remember when Leonid Brezhnev visited uh, um, Washington D.C. and Carter lined the streets of Washington D.C. with Soviet flags. It was like lines of red. I thought, what a dickhead, man! These people are an evil empire. You want to welcome a foreign dignitary. That's all fine and dandy, but you don't commie out the American streets with red hammers and sickles, which is really no different than putting up swastikas. It's the same thing. I don't want to get into that now, but there's no difference between Nazis and communists. And so it was he's just always been an idiot, out of step, doing the wrong thing. But my I think the worst thing that he did was, I like to call him the father of Middle East terrorism. And it all has to do with when the Ayatollah took over Iran. Again, thanks a lot, Carter. You gave us the number one terrorist state in the Middle East. I mean, we were great with the Shah. The Shah was cool. The Shah just needed to get his shit together, but Carter didn't know what he was doing. Carter adopted a non-interventionist policy when he came in, as a sort of a which was stupid, but it was a sort of what do you call, a sort of backlash. It's not the right word, but sort of a knee-jerk backward reaction to Vietnam. Remember, because we had just finally totally gotten out of Vietnam in '75, and people were boy, you talk about war weary. They talk about war weary these days. In 1975, people were tired of war with Vietnam. And so in '76, Carter he overcompensated and adopted this non-interventionist policy. And that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why the Ayatollahs were able to take over in Iran. And that was the birth. Now, there are people who will say, oh, terrorism was around before that. Okay, you had the PLO and you had some hijackings and some stuff, right? But Middle East state-sponsored terrorism did really not begin en masse and in full, blown concert until the Ayatollahs took over Iran. And because of their location, their size, and their wealth, and their being armed to the teeth with American military, because they had been, the day before, they had just been our ally. they became a powerful, and they immediately began to sponsor state terrorism in the region, right? And so Carter allowed that. He allowed that by allowing them to take power in the first place. But more than that, he oversaw the worst terrorist act. I believe it's probably, no, well, now 9/11 is the worst, right? But at the time was a shockingly unforgivable terrorist act against the United States, and that was when they took over our embassy. It lasted for over 400 days. 400 days. Can you imagine any American, a president, allowing an American embassy and all the American embassy personnel to be held hostage for 400 days? And then leaving office and not doing a fucking thing about it? Although he did try to do something and he failed. But what a fucking loser. And listen, I tell you people this, I have said this before in the context of other discussions. 1979, when they took those hostages, was a pivotal point. If you could go back in time in a time machine and react totally differently, if you could go back in a time machine to 1979 and make yourself president of the United States and react differently to that hostage situation, you could have avoided decades of really bad Middle East sponsored terrorism. And I'll tell you why. Very simple. The act of taking over our embassy was an act of war. The embassy is sovereign territory of a country. That was American sovereign territory. And such a bold, just a colossal act of terrorism had never been experienced in modern times. And it was a shock. It was huge. It was big. We were totally justified in eradicating that regime. Yes, the Cold War was raging and there was a Soviet Union, but I tell you what, I don't think the Soviet Union, I think the Soviet Union would have looked at that and said, yeah, we're not going to get in your way, because that was just, beyond the pale. Even the Soviets would have never, sponsored one of their vassal states to pull a boner like that, right? I mean, that's just over the pale. And I'm pretty sure if you had some smart, State Department guys, in the negotiations, they would have told the Soviet Union, you get the fuck out of our way. We're taking these fuckers out. And I'm pretty sure they would have got the fuck out of the way. So the correct response would have been to eradicate that regime in its infancy. Again, learning the lesson from World War II, if we had eradicated Germany in its infancy, when it was first going into the Saar land and the Sudetenland before it invaded Poland, we could have avoided World War II, but that's another story. See, you're supposed to learn from history, but people never learn from history, right? So if by failing to do that, Carter ushered in the era of the Iranian regime and the mullahs, and Iran being the #1 terrorist state, exporting terrorism, engaging in terrorism. Now, for 45 years, it has been approximately 45 years since that hostage crisis. And for 45 years, Iran has sponsored or been responsible for, directly or indirectly, most of the terrorism in the Middle East and around the world. They are the #1. Oh, but 9/11 didn't have nothing to do with Iran. Well, look, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, certainly over the course of the decades, right? Those Wahhabis in the Saudi Arabia and who were training in Afghanistan, who committed 9/11, were certainly influenced by the state-sponsored terrorism of Iran, if not directly responsible. So, it all built on itself. I'm, even though Iran had nothing to do with 9/11, I am quite sure that if we had eradicated Iran in '79 and didn't allow that tar baby to grow, I'll bet you 9/11 probably would have never happened. So, I mean, that's a guess on my part, but I think that's a pretty fair guess. But at any rate, 45 years of state-sponsored terrorism with the number one, that is Carter's legacy to foreign policy. Carter is the father of Middle East Islamic terrorism, for the most part, the biggie. So Carter was the worst. He was the worst. I mean, I can go into a whole lot of other stuff too, but I don't want my video to go long. But whether it was domestic policy, energy, the gas prices, the layoffs, the terrible economy, the interest rates, or the foreign policy, kissing the ass of the Russians, kissing the ass of Castro, the Mariana boat lift, and of course the embassy situation, and a whole lot more, right? And a whole lot more. Carter was the worst. So when we say Biden is the worst now, that should tell you how bad Biden really is. I mean, Biden matched all that, but with Biden, you can add on top of that social issues like grooming children in schools and abortion and his late term abortion and mutilating children's genitals in the name of transgenderism and his. I mean, Carter was a terrible, rotten president, but to his credit, I will give him one little piece of credit. I don't think he was actually anti-American and evil at heart. He claimed to be a Baptist. Pretty sure at the time he was not in favor of gay marriage. Now, see, like many people in the Democrat Party, they may start out as okay, but evil takes them over. They become evil. I mean, look at how these. I mean, even I won't go into it now, but I can point to the records of a lot of old Democrats who have flip-flopped on many things. They were once not in favor of gay marriage, then they are, and maybe not in favor of abortion, but then they are. And these are people who allow evil, their lust for power overtakes them, and evil creeps in and takes them over. Like that movie Nefarious. That movie Nefarious is great. He talks about the how people are taken over by demons, and he says that it ain't like a demon just jumps into a body and boom. It's a slow process. They open the door. Maybe one day as a kid you use a Ouija board and you open that door. Then maybe you do something bad and you open, and then over time you keep opening these doors and it grows and grows and grows. And that's what a lot of Democrats say. But while Carter was president at that time, I don't think he was an evil man. But Biden certainly is, and that's why he was able to surpass him as the worst president ever. But he certainly was a rotten president for all the reasons I said. So I do not mourn his passing. And there is one bright, good analogy here. After the dark 4 years of Carter it was morning in America again, and came Ronald Reagan, Ronaldus Maximus. Ronald Reagan came in and saved America. He, dare I say it, made America great again. He revived the economy. He revived the military. He made America strong again. He was a great president and a great man. And now, after 4 dark years of this filthy, sick, disgusting, degenerate Biden and his ignorant moron, whatever color she is, depending on the day. I mean, was she white? Is she black? She's Indian. She's this, that, the other thing. She's got a southern accent. She's got a northern accent. She's, whatever the fuck she is, camel toe Harris. Those dark days are now over. And again, it's morning in America. And Donald J. Trump returns to once again make America great again, to fix the economy, to seal the border, to rebuild the military, to do all the things that need to be done. And by God, there are a list of so many things that need to be done. And I'm going to finish up with one message. I made a video a couple of videos ago that said, this is just the beginning. Trump's election is only the beginning of the fight. The forces of evil and hate on the left, they never stop. They are at work, they are at work 24/7 in every level of society, government and the private sector, every strata, every class, everywhere they are at work undermining liberty, freedom, goodness, and yes, God. And this great victory with Trump, here's my message. Every one of you who worked hard, who donated, who worked hard, who hit the streets, whatever you did to do your part to elect Trump, you must keep doing. Don't stop. The election is just the beginning. It was just one battle. The election was kind of like D-Day. When we landed on the shores of France in D-Day, did we say, hey, we're here, it's all over with, let's barbecue and kick back? No. D-Day was a colossal, amazing event, but it was the beginning of the march to Berlin and finally eradicating evil. And it took a long time. I mean, in the context of the war, we still had years to go. I mean, and this battle is going to take a long time. It's actually never going to end. The battle between good and evil is immortal. It began when God cast Lucifer out of heaven along with his demons, and it has raged ever since in the spiritual realm, and that war has manifested itself in the material realm in many ways. The battle between good and evil. There is evil around this world that you cannot fathom. Just horrible evils that would make your skin crawl if you knew what goes on in this world. And it's the immortal battle between good and evil. And American politics, that immortal battle has manifested itself in the evil of the Democrats who support and embrace all manner of true evil, mutilating children, murdering children in the womb, I can't. That's not what this video is about. So anyway, my point is, I went a little long on my ending cap. My point is, the battle has just begun. It's not over. Now you keep fighting, you keep fighting at the state level, the local level. When Trump is done, you make sure that whoever gets in, whether it's a Vance or whoever, or maybe even the governor of Florida or somebody. But anyway, you keep going. and then you get on the school boards, and then you become mayor of your town, and you keep going. It never ever stops because the forces of evil never stop. So just remember that. Anyway, the inauguration is coming up. It is morning again in America, but it can turn dark again too. So do not let down your efforts. And I will see you in the please subscribe to our Substack page. I'll put a link in this subscription of this video. And I will see you in the next great American video. Adios, muchachos.